Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Sell, and my multimodal thematic unit is on establishing identity in young adult literature. The texts that I chose for this unit include Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, which was my book for the Choose Your Own YA Lit module. I also included Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez, and The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I picked all of these books because they all deal with young coming of age kids that are dealing with gender and sexual identity, racial and cultural identity, and then also how self-advocacy affects personal growth and personal identity. So the way that I have this organized is, in theory, it would take 4 weeks. Now, I teach 12th grade English honors, and so obviously theory is, only so much, but that's the intention. I did not include the time it would take to read these texts in the 4 weeks. If you wanted to put that in there, then you could expand it to be a full 6, but this particular unit is going off of the maybe unrealistic assumption that students are reading the text and the assigned chapters outside of class time. So the way that I have this broken down is I went with the theme of identity because I feel like that is super relevant, especially right now. I actually teach a blended course, so half of my kids are face-to-face, the other half are launch ed at home, because the state of Florida is still not fully opened up yet. And so I know that my students are really struggling with their identity now that they're home alone and they're not around their friends and family as much and the people that would kind of help them figure that out typically in a normal high school setting. So I chose these books because they each identify their own kind of perspective on personal identity. Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God looks at growth specifically and independence. The Hate You Give looks at racial and social injustices. Boy Meets Boy obviously has to do with a lot of sexuality and gender. And then I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter is fantastic. Unfortunately, it's fantastic because it deals with grief and loss, which a lot of our students are unfortunately facing these days. So just a brief schedule. This is how I try and organize my course most of the time, is to start the week with more like lecture heavy instruction, a lot of modeling. Usually I'll do almost an example or a class sample assignment so that later in the week when my students are working independently or collaboratively, they have that instruction to lean back on. They can look back at a rubric or at a past example and know what the expectations are. So I would probably start with introducing the text, and I like to give a lot of historical context and background because we're looking at identity with this unit. Knowing more about the characters and about the author typically helps students get a little bit of perspective and start to relate to these characters as if they're real people, because then they can start to see themselves in these protagonists. I'm a big fan of graphic organizers, and so I would definitely, probably second or third day of the week, have students start to break down the plot. That, of course, transitions perfectly into a character analysis, doing some sort of guided questions, talking about tone, talking about figurative language and devices, and how the literary works are categorized and how we know the protagonist is the protagonist. And then I usually take it a couple steps further and ask them to define some traits for each of the main characters and start to look at how the environment and the people around that character shape who they are and how we perceive them based on the author's choice of diction and word choice and things like that. So I usually would end the week with a collaborative task, probably the day before, just to review the content, make sure everybody's on the same page, and kind of have them infer and conference together about how this has a realistic setting and where these characters would be and who they would be like in their own lives if they were real. And then the last day, I usually try and do some sort of a quiz or a knowledge check as a formative assessment throughout the week. And then the end of the unit would end with a summative assessment. So the first book that I chose was Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and I picked that one specifically because of the evolution that character goes through. Obviously, she goes through several marriages, which hopefully my students are not going through several marriages. They're only like 17. But I think it's really great because you learn a lot about yourself when you are in a relationship, and who you are as a companion and a partner can define who you are independently. And I think that it's important for my students to understand that it is okay to build these relationships and rely on other people without comparing yourselves to them. And strength can sometimes be found in those bonds that are created. I also chose Boy Meets Boy. For this one particularly, I know I have specific students that struggle with identifying their sexuality. I work at a school that is very predominantly I don't want to say closed-minded, but not as accepting as the community in the book. And I included some quotes in one of my discussion posts, and I didn't have time for them here, but the words in this book, I mean, you want to talk identity. This boy is learning more about himself than he ever has through his partner and through, the world and how it perceives him. He learns about who he is as an individual. And I include in here, it is the best example of non-sexual intimacy that I have ever read. And I cannot imagine being a student who's struggling with my own sexual identity, reading these words, someone taking the time to put pen to page and define this this love that they have been told either they can't have or shouldn't have. And so I chose this one as well. I'm going a little long on time, I apologize. This one is great as well. Like I said, it deals with grief specifically because the main character, Julia, she loses her sister very early on in the book, and she learns now who she is, independent of being a daughter and a sister, and just being a young Mexican woman, and about how her culture shapes who she is. And like I said, the school that I work for is maybe not as diverse as I would like it to be, so giving these perspectives is super important to me. And the last one, The Hate You Give, obviously super relevant. You've got the Black Lives Matter movement. We're working with the Me Too movement right now. I mean, everything that's going on with the political unrest and injustice, with the George Floyd movement, everything happening in our community at this time. It is so important that I'm providing my students with this perspective, because when you are trying to figure out your identity and who you are, it helps to read someone who knows who they are and is actively fighting to embrace that personality. And in this case, Star is such an incredible activist. I just think it's very inspiring if I had a student that was struggling to find themselves. I included a little clip. I won't play it. It's very short, but if you want to watch it, the link is there. I just don't want to run over on time, but it's just a trailer because I think including clips of movies, not only the kids love that stuff for whatever reason, all they want to do is watch movies, but I think it includes a multimodal element and gives another perspective other than my own, because as the teacher, they're biased about how they perceive me and how I interpret these texts. And so I think it's nice for them to be able to make their own decision and watch a little clip like this. And then finally, just as a timeline, I would do Hurston first, then Levithan, then Sanchez and Thomas, and I indicated on the slide each of their own reasons. But the most important component for me is for students to understand and accept that everyone has the same struggles, because everyone is complex and multifaceted, and they all have like an intersexual human being that is struggling to find their own identity. As a grown adult, I'm still finding my identity, and I think including that element of just vulnerability and acceptance, understanding that the same way all these characters go through these tribulations, it's okay because everyone else around us is going through the same thing. And then finally, for the final assessment, I would probably do something very similar to this, because I am of the mindset that, true understanding, the way that you can really test mastery is, see one, do one, teach one. And I fully believe that having students work collaboratively to create a presentation that demonstrates not only their knowledge of each of the texts, because, you always have the kids that don't even read them. So this kind of forces them to, even if you don't know word for word, line by line what's going on, you've shown that you understand the theme and the ideology behind the text, behind why I assigned it, and then to look for connections between each of the main characters, and then also to find real life examples and to pull from the students' lived experiences. So yeah, that is everything. I'm so sorry I went a little bit long. I didn't realize you said 20 slides and I only made 12, but still, wow, I apologize. But here's my Works Cited page, and I'm hoping that I covered all the content that you were looking for. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this is what you were looking for, and I really enjoyed this class. It was super relevant to everything that I do every single day, and it was great for me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.